He's not cold. He's not bitter. And he sure as hell isn't lazy. He's just done. Done being the one who always explains himself. Done smiling out of habit instead of happiness. Done performing for approval, for peace, for the illusion of being okay. There comes a point in a man's life, often after 50, sometimes sooner, when something inside him quietly shifts, not with a bang, not with a breakdown, just a still, solid realization. He's exhausted not from doing too much, but from being someone he never truly was. For years he played the part, the calm one, the strong one, the one who always said, "I'm fine." Even when something inside was falling apart in slow motion, he said yes when he wanted to say no. He showed up when no one showed up for him. He carried the weight and called it duty. But that kind of life wears on a man. So now when people say, "You've changed," he just nods. Because yes, he has. He's no longer chasing applause in a room that doesn't see him. He's no longer explaining his silence to people who only understand noise. He's no longer setting himself on fire to keep everyone else warm. This isn't a breakdown. This is a homecoming. If you've ever looked in the mirror and realized you were performing more than you were living, if you've ever felt peace not as a luxury, but as a necessity, then you already know. He's not lazy. He's just finally real. He doesn't need to prove his worth anymore. There was a time when his value depended on how useful he was to others. He said yes when he was tired. He offered help before anyone asked. He made himself available not because he always wanted to, but because he didn't know who he was without being needed. He mistook being indispensable for being loved. Back then, he thought his worth was something to be earned, that if he just worked harder, gave more, stayed longer, maybe then he'd finally be seen, respected, appreciated. But what did he get instead? I was burned out, was being taken for granted, was being the strong one in rooms that drained him dry. Now, he doesn't jump just because someone calls his name. He doesn't volunteer for every burden just to feel essential. He doesn't twist himself into the good guy just to keep the peace, because he knows now, peace isn't something you earn by disappearing yourself. His worth isn't measured by his productivity. It's not validated by approval, and it's no longer up for debate. He doesn't have to explain why he needs rest. He doesn't have to justify his solitude. He doesn't have to prove he matters. He does, simply by being. And if someone can't see that, they were never looking at him to begin with, just what he could do. Now, he's not here to prove anything. He's here to live. He's done explaining his piece. There was a time he felt guilty for choosing quiet. He'd cancel plans and feel like a bad friend. He'd decline an invitation and spend hours wondering if he should have just gone to keep the peace. He'd choose solitude, but then explain it away with an excuse. "I'm just tired. Maybe next time. Sorry, been busy." But the truth was simpler. He was searching for stillness. And stillness is hard to explain to people addicted to noise. People used to ask why he needed so much alone time, why he liked slow mornings, soft lights, long silences. He used to answer. He'd talk about needing to recharge, about the way the world moved too fast, about how the quiet helped him think clearly. But over time, he realized not everyone wants to understand. Some people need you loud, reactive, constantly available, because it makes them feel secure. But he's not here to perform comfort for someone else's insecurity. So now, he just says, "No, thank you." He stays home without apology. He guards his peace like the sacred thing. It is not something to be negotiated, not something to be explained. If someone sees his silence as distance, so be it. If they confuse his calm with coldness, that's not his burden. Because peace doesn't need justification. It only needs honoring. And the man who finally finds his peace stops wasting breath explaining it to those who never truly valued it. He's tired of wearing the strong one mask. He's been the one who keeps it together always. When others panicked, he stayed calm. When things fell apart, he showed up. When someone needed carrying emotionally, financially, or otherwise, he put them on his back and kept walking. Not because he was unshakable, but because he thought that's what being a man meant. No complaints, no tears, no weakness. He was the rock, the shelter, the solution. But what they didn't see, what he never let them see, was that behind every calm nod, behind every "I've got it handled," was a man quietly unraveling. A man who wanted to rest his head, not hold everyone else's weight. A man who was tired of being needed, but never truly known. The truth? Strength isn't the absence of pain. It's the courage to carry it silently. But even that courage has a cost. And one day, he woke up and realized the mask was too heavy, the act too rehearsed, the smile too forced. So now, he lays the armor down. He doesn't want to be the strong one if it means never being allowed to break. He doesn't want to be the hero if it means he can't be human. He wants softness without shame, support without asking twice, a space where he can finally exhale, not because the world is perfect, but because he's no longer pretending to be. Because even the strongest men need a place where they can stop performing and just breathe. He chooses rest without guilt. He used to feel ashamed for slowing down. Napping in the afternoon made him feel lazy. Turning down weekend plans made him feel like he was letting people down. Resting, truly resting, felt like he was wasting time. Because for years, rest wasn't rest. It was recovery between performances. He'd collapse into bed not because he chose to, but because his body gave out. He'd take a day off and spend it catching up on chores. He'd sit still, but his mind would race, listing all the things he should be doing. Guilt followed him like a shadow. Because he was raised to believe that a good man provides, performs, persists. That stillness is slacking. That quiet is weakness. That exhaustion is a badge of honor. But not anymore. Now, he sleeps when he's tired and doesn't explain why. He says no to invitations that don't feel right without guilt. He lets his mornings be slow, his evenings be quiet, his pace be his own. Not because he's lazy, but because he's listening. To his body, to his breath, to the quiet inner voice that says, you don't have to earn rest. You deserve it. He no longer ties his value to how much he gets done. He no longer shames himself for needing space. He no longer apologizes for protecting his energy, because now he knows. Rest isn't weakness, it's wisdom. He'd rather be alone than perform again. He's been in rooms full of people and felt invisible. He's been in relationships where he laughed, listened, touched, and still felt miles away from himself. He knows what it's like to sit across the table from someone who says, you can tell me anything, but doesn't really want the truth, just the version that won't make things uncomfortable. So now, he'd rather be alone than edited. He doesn't want to shrink to be liked. He doesn't want to rehearse who he is just to avoid rejection. He doesn't want connection if it comes at the cost of authenticity. Dating? He's not swiping, not chasing, not performing charm like a salesman in a crowded market. Friendships? If it requires pretending to be on all the time, he quietly steps away. Even family, yes. Even there, if the connection is built on obligation instead of honesty, he lets space do its quiet work. Because he's learned, loneliness isn't being alone. It's being unseen in the presence of others. And the cure for that isn't more people. It's more truth. He wants the kind of connection that doesn't need noise to feel real. Where silence isn't awkward, it's respected. Where presence is enough. No punchlines, no performance. So if that means fewer texts, fewer birthdays remembered, fewer chairs at the table, that's okay. Because the man who's done performing would rather sit in silence with his soul intact than speak 1,000 empty lines to fit in. He honors his energy now. There was a time when he said yes before he even heard the question. Need help moving? He's there. Need a last-minute ride to the airport? He's got it. Need a shoulder to cry on at midnight after vanishing for weeks? He'll answer. He used to think his availability defined his worth. The more he gave, the more valuable he was. The more exhausted he became, the more noble it felt. But now, he guards his energy like something sacred, because it is. He no longer pushes himself to attend every event. He doesn't stay late out of politeness. He leaves when he's tired, not when the room is empty. Not out of rudeness, out of alignment. Because he's learned something no one taught him when he was younger. Energy is currency, and he's done going bankrupt to keep the peace. Now, he moves slower, but with intention. He doesn't scatter himself in 100 directions just to feel productive. He shows up fully, or not at all. His presence is no longer guaranteed. It's earned through mutual respect, emotional safety, and genuine connection. And if someone sees that as selfish, so be it. Because the man who used to give until there was nothing left has finally realized that he too deserves to be fueled, not just drained. So now, he gives wisely. He rests unapologetically, and he walks away from anything or anyone that costs him his peace. He speaks less but means more. He used to talk to be understood. He'd explain, justify, repeat himself, hoping that if he said it the right way, just once more someone would finally get it. Arguments turned into marathons, conversations into competitions. Every disagreement became a test of how well he could defend his truth. But these days, he doesn't argue to win. He doesn't talk to fill space. He doesn't perform intelligence or emotion just to be heard. Because he's learned, the more grounded a man becomes, the less he needs to prove. Now, when he speaks, it's with intention. He doesn't raise his voice, he raises his standard. He doesn't explain his boundaries, he lives them. He doesn't chase validation, he stands in clarity. Some say he's become quiet. Some think he's withdrawn. But the truth is, he's become precise. He's no longer interested in exhausting conversations that go in circles. no longer willing to spend hours explaining his heart to someone committed to misunderstanding it. He speaks when it matters and lets silence do the rest, because maturity taught him something youth never could. Volume doesn't equal value, and the strongest truths don't shout, they settle. Now, when he says, no, it means no. When he says, enough, he means it. And when he says, I'm done, he's not bluffing, he's protecting what's left. He's creating, not proving. There was a time when everything he did had an audience in mind. He worked late to be seen as responsible. He dressed a certain way to be taken seriously. He offered insights, ideas, gestures not always from his soul, but from a quiet hunger to be validated. Success used to mean applause. Creativity used to mean strategy. Even joy, sometimes, felt curated, not felt. But that chapter's over. Now, he paints because colors calm him. He builds because shaping something with his hands brings him peace. He cooks because the scent of rosemary in a quiet kitchen reminds him of his mother's voice. He creates not for proof, but for presence. He's not publishing everything. He's not promoting everything. He's not asking, do you like it, after every effort, because he no longer needs the world's permission to feel proud of what flows through him. He no longer confuses performance with passion. He no longer needs metrics to measure meaning. What he makes now, whether it's a wooden bench, a thoughtful letter, or a slower life, is rooted in something far deeper than ego. It's rooted in wholeness. He's not trying to be the best. He's just trying to be aligned. And when a man reaches that place, everything he touches, even if no one sees it, carries the quiet signature of a man who finally knows. Real creation doesn't need a stage. It just needs a soul that's done pretending. They'll say, you've changed. And they're right, just not in the way they think. You didn't become bitter. You became honest. You didn't give up. You stopped giving away what cost you too much. There comes a moment, often quietly, often without fanfare, when a man wakes up in his own life and no longer recognizes the performance he's been giving. He sees how often he smiled to keep the peace, how often he stayed when he should have walked, how much of himself he traded for belonging, for approval, for love that never really saw him. And in that moment, he doesn't snap, he doesn't rage, he doesn't burn bridges. He simply steps back, not to disappear, but to return to himself. Because peace isn't passive, stillness isn't surrender, and silence isn't emptiness. It's reclamation. You're not lazy, brother. You're aligned. You're not cold. You're clearing space for warmth that isn't conditional. And if fewer people understand you now, that's okay, because the ones who do see the real you. So if you've ever chosen presence over performance, truth over convenience, solitude over shallow connection, then you're not alone. Drop a quiet comment below. I'm not lazy. I'm finally living real. And if this message resonated, send it to the one man you know who's been giving too much and slowly fading. Let him know he doesn't have to perform to belong. He just has to come home to himself. Subscribe for more truth, more stillness, more strength without noise. We're walking this road together. Slower now, but finally, on our own terms.